Welcome to IndieQuest, a celebration of the indie and obscure. We're talking about video games, indie and obscure video games. I am one of your hosts, Josh, also known as Frantic on the interwebs, and also with me, I have Steve. Also known as Blink. Yeah, I know. I was like,
lead me in. He's got me. He's bringing me in.
Let's chat about some VR stuff, man. This episode's going to be a couple of awesome VR picks. That's what we decided for this episode. So what's your opinions on VR? Do you like PlayStation VR? That's what you have, right?
VR, I love VR. Straight up, I'm a huge fan of VR. But I think it's kind of hard to find time for. If anything, I just feel guilty that I don't get around to more VR stuff. But I go back to thinking about the first time I put on that headset and got lost in, oh gosh, what game was the first one I played on PSVR? I think it was Job Simulator. And I remember it was just like this unreal experience, like just being transported to an entire other place. And after like 20, 30 minutes of playing it, for anyone that hasn't played Job Simulator, it's a stationary VR game, and you're basically just doing regular jobs. Like you're working in an office, you're working on as a car mechanic, or at a gas station as like a clerk behind the counter. But it's very funny. It's a comedy-based game. There were these moments, especially during working as like the gas station attendant, where they'd ask you to like lean over and grab something, and I would try to lean onto the counter, but there'd be no counter there. And so I'd like almost fall over because I get so lost in the world that I forget that there's nothing for me to actually lean against. Yeah. I love VR stuff, and I'm super pumped we're picking some VR stuff, and I'm super pumped about our games. What about you? How you feel about VR?
I like it. Okay. Let's just rewind back. This is the first time I actually experienced it was in a Best Buy. They had like those VR, when you could go to a Best Buy and be around people. They had VR test kits like before it came out. So me and my brother, Justin, we went over there and we were so stoked. Oh, finally we get to try VR because it hadn't come out yet. I think, of course, Oculus was already out. I had tried the Oculus like original at some convention or something before, just a little like dinky game. It wasn't anything major, but the first thing I ever tried was the Shark Attack game off of PlayStation VR World inside of a Best Buy.
Is that one where you're being attacked in a cage?
Yeah, you're getting attacked by a shark in a cage. So it was an interesting experience because like it gives you that sense of place and you really feel like things are coming at you and stuff. So that was my first experience playing that game, and then I played a little bit of Battlezone 2, which is like basically a remake of that classic arcade game in VR, and has like wireframes and stuff. You play a wireframe tank and you destroy other tanks. It's pretty fun. So my first experience with that was pretty awesome, and then it took me a couple years to actually pick up a unit myself. I waited for a sale, and I got Astrobot VR, or Astrobot was like the first game I sat down and like really got into, and that game's fantastic. And I actually popped it in a couple days ago when I was playing some VR for this, and I was like, dude, I never beat this game. How did I not beat this game? So you actually said something about this game last time when we decided to do this episode.
Massive Astrobot fan, yeah. I can't recall if I've mentioned it on a previous episode, but not too long ago I was building what my favorite games of the last decade of gaming have been, and Astrobot didn't make that top 10 list, but it was super, super close. That is probably one of, if not my favorite VR game, and I think it's like legitimately one of the better platformers that we've had in the last 10 years on any system, whether it's VR or not.
Yeah, it has like an incredible sense of scale, and it's just really fun and charming. Great music, great level design. It's an awesome game. It's not indie though, so technically we couldn't include it here. But hey, I had to mention it. But for me, PlayStation VR is just the first thing that comes to mind is it's a hassle, really, to set up, to clear the space. I have not too much space in my apartment to like really do much. I have to like slide the coffee table out of the way, move my couch back a bit, all that stuff, and it's just a pain in the ass to get going. And then the tracking, especially with animals, I have 2 cats, so they'll just run around in front of the VR thing while I'm playing, and it just like the tracking gets lost, and they're like, oh crap, come on, stuff like that. And it can be frustrating at times. And when I'm in the experience and everything works flawlessly and perfectly, I'm like, I'm here. I'm in this world doing whatever the game has me doing. I'm interacting with the environments, and I just feel like I'm in a different place and a different time. And that's the magic of VR right there. But like I said, occasionally I just feel like it's a little bit of a hassle. I did used to play Beat Saber like every day for like a mini workout, and I love Beat Saber, so I had it set up like permanently for quite some time, maybe like 4 months. So I would just take it off have a little rack over here. I just take it off of there and put it on my head and just play Beat Saber for a bit, and I loved doing that. But it kind of just got to the point where I had to like take it off and put it in the closet, and then take it out of the closet, rehook it up every single time I want to use it. So it becomes a hassle when it's that type of thing,
Yeah, Beat Saber was actually almost going to be my pick for this episode, but I was like, you know what? If we're going to do a VR themed episode, I'd like to bring something a little smaller and probably a little bit less known. I feel like most people that know VR know what Beat Saber is. It's hard to imagine the person that has never heard of it before.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't know what it is, it's a rhythm game where you have 2 lightsabers in each of your hands, and you're hitting blocks that come at you in the pattern of the music. Super simple, but it gets pretty intense. Like,
yeah, you'll get sore wrists,
especially on expert. I know it's not really a workout, but I sweated. I was sweating. There was some sweat in that VR headset every time I got out of there. So I did some cardio, man. It's better than nothing.
You do some of those expert or expert plus songs, yeah, you're gonna start sweating. I got no judgment there. Even some of the hard stuff, like it's an intense game. It's funny, going back to what you were saying about tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And I should clarify to everyone, really 99% of my experience with VR is with the PlayStation VR. I have played an Oculus at a buddy's house and a Vive at a buddy's house for half hour to an hour, and they seem to work pretty well. But I can really only speak from the perspective of a PlayStation VR owner. The thing that was most difficult for me in getting the tracking set up was finding where I could set up my living room to accommodate VR. Not because I didn't have the space, because I do have the space, and we don't have like a coffee table or anything. We just have an ottoman that I slide out of the way. But it's because I couldn't find a place in our basement to put the TV where there wasn't a reflective surface behind me. And the lights on the back of a PlayStation VR headset will bounce off of a reflective surface and get picked up by the camera for tracking. So you start going all wonky. And even in my current setup right now, directly behind me, I have a big whiteboard where I write all the games that I beat on it. And it reflects off that. So whenever I'm going to have a real serious VR session, I'll take a sheet from my bed and I'll drape it over the whiteboard so there's no reflective surface, and I'll play it that way.
This random tangent, and I've told this in Discords and stuff, when I was 5 years old, I was on the cover of an album, right? So I have that album framed here behind me, and it's in a glass thing. So I do the same exact thing. It's in a glass case. So I was playing the upcoming game, actually, that I'm talking about, and there's positional head tracking, and I noticed that my head would randomly go to the right, randomly. And that frame was behind me on the right, so it was reflecting and picking up that and it thought my head was to the right a little bit. So it was very disorienting because I would lean to the right, and then it would just go super far to the right, and I'm like, whoa, okay, where am I? Stuff like that. So ended up having to get a blanket and just ball it up in front of it. It's like, okay, we're good. So yeah.
Now we're much better.
Yeah, I had that issue this last week too.
What usually ends up happening for me is I get that situation where it kind of slowly drifts to the side. It slowly turns and you keep needing to reorient it back to the center. So if I'm playing a game like Tetris Effect, which is another one I play pretty often in VR, if I play for 20 minutes or so, after 20 minutes, I'll be basically completely facing to the left because it will just have naturally drifted 90 degrees and I have to reset it. But all in all, I think tracking issues aside, I certainly hope that they can fix them in the next, in the PlayStation 5 and whatever new iteration of headset and camera and everything that are coming out as a result of that. But I think VR is super cool. And I actually think VR is a perfect touch point for us on indie games because there's a ton of creativity in the VR space because it's kind of a new field. Everyone's still sort of feeling out what works, what doesn't. And so you get a lot of different genres. You get some like interpretations of genres that already exist in VR. You get some new stuff. It's a pretty wide pool to pick from, and there's lots of little studios, 2-3 people producing games. So I wouldn't be surprised for everyone to see other VR themed episodes from us crop up from time to time. I think it's easy for us to sort of touch base in VR.
Definitely, and it gives me an excuse to pull out my unit Ha 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 ha. Anyway, okay. It gives me an excuse to pull out my unit, my PSVR unit. I have other excuses to pull out. Okay, never mind. Pull out my VR unit and plop down on the couch or stand, depending on the game, and enjoy it. But yeah, I used that opportunity playing this game. I was like, man, I'm going to play a bunch of other games. The other one I was playing was Super Hot, which I've played on and off. I played the demo a few times, and I didn't actually beat it this go around. But that game is just that's just a recommendation off the top here. Like Astrobot and Super Hot are like must-haves for VR, in my opinion.
Whenever I'm recommending games to people, my must-haves are usually basically the ones we've talked about: Astrobot, Super Hot, Beat Saber, and Tetris Effect are like my 4 standards that I recommend to people. And spoilers for everyone, that's not either of the 2 games we're about to bring to you, but I still think we picked some cool games. And yeah, I'm actually excited at the prospect of digging a little deeper into the library down the line somewhere. It's like you said, when you get it all brought out and you get it all set up, you kind of want to make that worth your time. And so like digging through the library and playing a couple different games is usually kind of the best option, I think.
I've actually almost picked up an Oculus Quest in the past because it's, it's its own thing. But I was like, no, let's just see what PlayStation is doing, because they actually filed a patent to do inside-out tracking, so you wouldn't even need a camera. And you can use your hands as the controller, so you don't even need controllers in a lot of games. That's crazy,
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. I've seen some demos of it used on like some of the more modern VR units, like the Index and stuff. And you literally don't need a controller. It's just your hands are in the world. So
wow, like being able to grab objects and stuff?
Yeah, so just imagine you're like climbing a ladder. You can just grab the ladder with your hands, mime it basically.
Wow, that's really cool. I mean, I would like the option to still have controllers, because some games obviously will have control interfaces that necessitate it. Not everything can be like motion controls, but especially for, like job simulator type stuff where very tactile, you're grabbing objects, you're moving it around. Mm-hmm. If I could just use my hand, that would be amazing. Even if I had to wear some kind of like an old NES Power Glove style contraption, I'd still be happy to do it. That sounds awesome.
That type of technology is super fascinating to me. So whenever I see a new story about it, I'm just reading like, dude, this is the future. Like, it's so awesome. But yeah, when you're playing PlayStation VR, you definitely feel like it's first generation tech. It does feel a little blurry at times. When you get that focus, like it's super focused, like it's almost crystal clear, but occasionally you feel like you're seeing through a screen door and it kind of gets blurry on the edges or blurry in the center. For me, I don't know, it might just be my eyes.
No, it's the same for me. And I'll also say that I don't know that the PSVR is super great as a glasses wearer.
Yeah, that probably does affect it quite a bit, I would say.
Exactly. And I haven't ever found a super comfortable position for like the headset long term. I either find something where the vision's pretty good, but I start to get a headache after like an hour, or I like just kind of deal with some blurriness. But it works well enough. It works as like you said, first generation tech. You take your lumps because you're getting so many crazy unique experiences, right?
Yep.
It is one of those things where once I get into the flow state of playing something, I kind of forget about all that little stuff that's bothering me. It's worth the setup, even if when you're getting it all set up, it maybe sometimes feels like a lot.
Yeah, and I know I sound like I'm complaining, but dude, I've played so much awesome VR stuff. But speaking of VR, why don't we jump into our indie picks? You want to do yours first?
Yeah, let's dig in. So I was pretty excited to bring this because it's a game that I played about a year ago, and I thought it was pretty fun, but no one I know has played it, so it's just kind of like sat in the back of my memory forever. So I did a little bit of refresh on it. We pulled it back out, poked around a little bit, and that game is Static. That's Statik, at the end. This is a puzzle game. It's developed and published by what I think is pronounced Tarsier Studios? Tarsier Studios?
Tarsier.
Tarjois.
I don't know.
It's Tarsier for anyone looking it up. But yeah, this is a puzzle game that does a really good job of using the VR tech and the controller like together. And so, first off, before I start explaining, have you ever seen this game? Have you ever played it? Any familiarity at all?
I feel like I might have seen it. It's the one with the hands in the box, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a trailer. I never played it though.
Okay, cool. So the core mechanic of this game is that you are a test subject and you have your hands basically stuck into a box. Think of something like Saw, essentially. The game starts, you wake up, you're seated in a chair in the game, and you're looking around and you're in this kind of like office facility, maybe a little bit of like a scientific research facility. It's not super clear. You look down and both of your hands are like trapped inside of this cube with all sorts of dials and levers and numbers and stuff on it. And that is represented really well because your hands are also on the PlayStation 4 controller, right? So you think of holding a PlayStation 4 controller, your hands are kind of like locked in place out in front of you. Mm-hmm. And so as you, while holding the controller, kind of turn your wrists around, you can see different sides of the box, but you never need to take your hands off the controller to like understand all these different faces of the box. And then you start playing around with the different buttons on the controller, and they'll all do something completely random. So one of them might, slide a lever back and forth. One of them might just make a light on the box pop on and off. One of them might make a little corner of the box pop out and spin. And you're essentially just looking at these different sides of the box that are all different puzzles and working out how you can solve this puzzle box that your hands are trapped inside.
That's super fascinating. It kind of reminds me. Have you ever played the Room games on mobile?
I was just gonna say that. Yep.
Yeah,
spot on.
It's pretty much what I'm thinking of. You just kind of slowly tinker away at a box and open it up. That's awesome. That's a really cool idea, and it really does play with your like sense of place too. Because just the idea of your hand stuck in a box, yeah, that makes sense. You're holding a controller. And what's like the environments? What does everything look like that's around you? Like, is it like a laboratory? What is it?
Yeah, so the easiest shorthand is probably it has a little bit of the Portal energy. Like, it has that sort of clean scientific research facility mixed with a little bit of Office Space type stuff. Not Office Space the movie. Office Space like the location.
Oh, well, my mind went to like... I need you to come in on Saturday or whatever. Anyway, go ahead.
Same general idea, I suppose. But yeah, so it's like, tables and some computers set up and a couple of cubicles sometimes, things like that. But what's actually kind of trippy is the story doesn't reveal itself until later on. But, you wake up, you're trapped in this chair with this puzzle box around your hand. And there's this other character who's like a research scientist talking to you. And he'll basically just like, very calmly but kind of creepily explains to you like you're going to need to just work on this project for us. We're just very interested to see what you can deduce from this box. I believe in you. I believe that you're going to be able to overcome these trials that are in front of you, that type of thing. And after he sort of gives that little explanation, he'll sit back in his office chair with his clipboard and he'll just like take notes. And in VR, he's sitting like 10 feet away from you. And every now and again, this NPC will just be like, interesting. You'll like press a button and move the box around and be like, so that's how you think that works.
So it's kind of like a GLaDOS, but not like as creepy? Or is it still really creepy?
No, not as creepy. GLaDOS is more like ominous, kind of messing with you. And then this dude is more like... it's just kind of unnerving to be watched, or like when you're trying to figure something out and someone is watching you, you feel more pressure to figure it out quicker.
Does the game have like a lighthearted tone to it? Like all in all, is it kind of like a Portal in that aspect? Does it have like jokes, or is it more serious?
It does have some jokes, but I would say overall it's maybe a little less lighthearted. It's never scary. Like, this isn't a horror game that you would play for Halloween or anything, but it is like a little more. Portal, I feel, is a little more jokey until the serious bits, whereas this is a little more, you're just confused the whole time. You're not really sure what's going on. And then every now and again they pepper in a joke. But, sometimes you'll be sitting there and there'll be like a radio nearby that's basically playing like elevator music or like hotel lobby music. So this weird kind of like gentle surf rock playing is sort of funny while you're trying to figure out this weird box on your hand. And, I compared it to Saw earlier, but the puzzles are always usually like technology based. They're not like horrible chainsaws and stuff that'll cut your hands off if you can't solve it in time. It's like keypads and numbers and symbols and different random things like that.
As you go through and you slowly unlock this box, is it just one box, or do you get multiple boxes? Is it you do the box and you win? How does that work?
Yeah, so it resets constantly, and there's a bunch of different boxes that you'll do over the course of the game. So you'll solve one, which usually just like entails you opening the box to see something that's inside of it or something like that. After you then successfully solve that one box, you basically just get like injected with something or knocked unconscious in some way. It's not super clear, the story, but basically they're like, all right, the test is done. We're going to knock you out until we need you again. And then in the game, you'll go into this weird kind of like dreamlike state in between puzzle boxes that it involves you like grabbing these different pieces and like putting them together into weird Tetris shapes. Kind of hard to describe, but it's just essentially like a block building puzzle that acts as an intermission, and it's always the same mechanic every time. And then you'll roll into another puzzle box. But as the game goes, like, I wouldn't want to spoil any of these for people because they start to get pretty cool. But the game does start to play with you in some pretty interesting ways, and you start needing to do some real careful observation of more than just the box that's on your hands. Where you're sitting or like some other cues start to also become very relevant, and the environments you're in and everything. It's just they had this concept and they sort of like took it to a pretty large conclusion. Like they really played with the mechanics a lot.
Sweet. So you're like this lab rat and all this stuff's going on. How does like VR enhance the experience? Like, could you play this on a flat screen and still have as good of an experience, or does VR just add that extra little seasoning that what is that? Je ne sais quoi, if you will.
I mean, I do think mechanically there's no reason this game couldn't be in VR, but I think just how easy it is when your hands are on the controller to quickly spin your hands around and look at every side of the box is such a natural feeling compared to if you were like rotating the box on a set axis that they had already defined or flipping between sides. It makes it feel a little more, it makes the stakes feel a little more personal, I guess.
A little more
than it just being puzzle.
Yeah, it gives you that tactile feel. Yeah, I get it. And having that disconnect, if you were looking at a screen with the hands on a screen, it would not be the same because you literally feel like that's your hands. Like you're looking down at your own hands, right?
Like I said, sometimes the environment you're in is relevant. So that feeling in VR of like moving your hands in the box out of the way to like, look maybe at the ceiling or the walls or things around you, that feels a lot better in VR than it would if you were just moving a camera around. I think it'd be a little trickier. But I mean, fundamentally, it is pretty similar in some ways to, have you ever played Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes?
I've watched lots of Let's Plays, but I've never played it. But I know the basic mechanics of it.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing where you can play it outside of VR, but in VR, it enhances the experience in a pretty cool way. Very, very well designed for the platform it's on.
That's awesome, man. And it's actually, I was thinking about it while you were talking, like, it's pretty much suited for a seated position. And since you're always sitting in the game, which is something I noticed with VR games that give you seated positions, there's like an in-world reason why you are in a seated position a lot of times, which it's just a nice little thing that you don't really notice unless you think about it.
Yeah, and it's nice for me because as much as I hate to admit it, I do get a little bit motion sick if I play certain VR games, especially ones with like a lot of movement in 3D space. So anything where you're locked in place in a static position is pretty safe for anyone who is early in their VR career or does get motion sickness. And so it's probably a game that most people that can play VR at all can play without too many issues.
Yeah, static, no pun intended, right? Anyway.
Oh snap.
What I think that it has some music. How's it sound? Like I said in the last episode or the episode before, how does it sound?
Sounds. The music itself fits that kind of like playful but a little bit ominous tone. Most of the music is very background music. A lot of just like spooky tones and like long minor notes drawn out and stuff. Not a lot of like melodies or nothing you're going to tap your toes to, other than when they play that little like elevator music for a bit or as a joke or to make it feel like a sense of place. But I think that the soundtrack fits the game pretty well, and the sound design itself, all of the different like whirling and buzzing sounds on the pieces of the box that you move around are really well done. So you'll move stuff around and you hear like a that type of thing. Nice. Very like dentist drill action.
Yeah.
A lot of cool stuff like that.
Make me think of like a Star Wars droid or something like that when you were doing those sounds.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the sound engineers had done a little R2-D2 record and then pitch shifted it to make some of these sound effects.
Nice. Any like last final thoughts before we decide where you place it on the log?
The story itself, like the actual story you go through, like I said, reveals itself mostly in like the last fourth of the game, but it's got kind of a neat little twist. It's interesting, something you could probably pick up on if you're paying attention, but it goes in an interesting direction. It's a decently satisfying conclusion, and it's a nice length game. Like it's a nice tight about 3 hours, maybe 3.5, depending on how stumped you get on some of the puzzles. So it's perfect for one long VR sitting or maybe 2 broken up sittings. I think it's like it's just a real great introductory VR game. Super cool.
Yeah, and especially with VR, you don't want to sit there for 6-7 hours straight and then like get chafes on your head and all that. So what we do here is we have a quest log. So what the quest log is this running list of awesome indie games. If it's going to be, it has 2 sections, the main quest and the side quest. If it's on a main quest, go play it right now. It's a must play. Go jump in your car, drive across town, go to your mom's house, say, Mom, I need some money, and get some money from your mom. Drive all the way back, get some Taco Bell on the way home. Don't forget that.
Hell yeah.
Go home, and then eat your Taco Bell, maybe watch some YouTube, and then play the game right away. If it's a side quest, it's a game that you can put off, play when you're kind of feeling in the mood, but it's not like an absolute must play, like right now, go out and play it. So where are you going to put this awesome VR title static on the quest log?
I like your way of describing that for the people. Is this a game that you can only put 1 order of Taco Bell between me and playing it? Or can I put, 10, 12, 15 orders of Taco Bell between me and playing it? That's relatable. I can understand that. So like I was saying, it is an excellent introductory game for VR. Like this is really good to play as one of your first few VR games. And I love the puzzle box mechanic. Like I'm just such a sucker for puzzle box type stuff like that. But it does borrow some tone from some other popular games that you might be familiar with. And, whether or not it being 3 hours is a good or a bad thing is going to be sort of up to individual preference. Some people might say that that's way too slight. All in all, though, really excellent game. I think probably this one is a side quest game. When I think of some of the other VR games that I know I would put on the main quest, I think this one fits pretty cleanly into the side quest. But as with everything on the side quest, my tender heart feels the need to remind people, as with everything on the side quest, These are great games that you should play. It's just not something that I'm going to get mad at you if you don't play it tomorrow. I'll just get mad at you if you don't play it ever.
Exactly. So I guess it's my turn, huh? To bring a game to the old indie picks, right? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you brought one, I think now would be the perfect time to talk about it.
Nah, I didn't. So thank you guys for listening too. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I brought a game. I've been meaning to play this game. So before I jump into the game, it's Moss. It's developed by Polyarc. But before I jump into the game, I got a little anecdote. One day I was on Twitter, and I was following them because I've been following Moss, like seeing the development of it. And I just follow a lot of indie devs. I follow devs in general. I kind of like to follow games as they're coming out and stuff. Except for Fortnite. I followed Fortnite for one day, and then I got very annoyed because they spam tweets like crazy, and I unfollowed them, but that's a different story. But I'm following Polyarc, and I see they're doing a contest for a skateboard that has the main character from Moss on it, Quill. And I don't have it here. It's actually hanging up over there. I'll show it to you later, or I'll post a picture of it or something. But basically, I won a skateboard off of a tweet from Polyarc for Moss, and I had never played the game. So I felt pretty guilty. And it's literally a deck. Like, it's an actual skateboard. It has wheels and everything. It's crazy.
So it's a funny story that you mentioned it. Or it's funny that you mentioned that because I think it was, how long ago was that at this point? Maybe a year ago, maybe more?
When I did that, I don't remember when it was, because I definitely was like, I was kind of being a little braggadocious on Discords and stuff like, dude, I want a skateboard. Look at this awesome skateboard. So it was probably like maybe 10 months ago, something like that.
Yeah. So I don't think you were being too braggadocious about it, but I remember this was not super long after I had played Moss, and I'm not gonna get into how I feel about it out ahead of time, but let's just say that I'm looking forward to talking about Moss. And you posted it up, and I think you and I hadn't met that much earlier than this. Like, this is pretty early into us getting to know each other, and I had to check myself. I had to be like, this guy winning this skateboard deck that I wanted to win. I have to be the bigger man and be happy for him when all I really want is to have it for myself. But no, it is really awesome that you won it, and I'm glad that now you had the opportunity to play the game, so now you can appreciate it that much more.
Yeah, and I still feel guilty. It took me so long to play it. It's just like, I had bought it like so long ago too, and it's just been sitting on my PlayStation 4, like downloaded. Like, I kept seeing it on the freaking game bar, like taunting me. But this gives me an opportunity to sit down and play this game. And what is this game? What's Moss? Let me describe it for you guys a little bit here. It's a platformer. It's you play as the reader, so it has like a in-world like explanation as to why you're playing in VR. So basically, you sit down at the beginning of the game and you're reading a storybook. It's told to you through a storybook, and then you kind of go into the storybook and become like this, like, what would you say? It kind of reminds me of like a Miyazaki like character, like the character you play. You can only see yourself in reflections, like you're like this big glowy ominous creature that's helping out this little mouse throughout this adventure.
Yeah, kind of like a No Face type thing from Miyazaki.
Yeah, No Face. That's what I was thinking of. But yeah, you look down, you can see like if you look in a reflection, you actually see yourself, like, quote unquote, yourself in the world, and it's like this like huge like towering creature, and they call you the reader. And you see this little mouse named Quill, and you control like any other platformer you would, like a 3D platformer. You have, all control with your PlayStation 4 controller. It's not a move game or anything like that. And you are basically helping out this mouse go on this like mystical adventure in this storybook world. And I really enjoyed it. I think the gameplay was really great. I think the sense of presence is really good in the world. Like the way they, like, even at the beginning when you sit down in the chair, you can look up and there's like this like towering like ceiling. Like everything looks so huge. Mm-hmm. They really do a good job putting you in the quote unquote shoes of, this reader character.
Yeah, definitely. One of the first things that was striking to me about Moss was the animation, especially the animation for Quill. It's so lifelike and so believable. Like it feels kind of silly to say it, but it's basically as perfect as a mouse could be animated. Like it's so realistic, and I never like noticed any clipping or anything weird. I just remember anytime I was like even getting real close in with the headset looking at Quill, I always thought, man, this just looks phenomenal. It's so well done.
Yeah, I would say it's like a masterclass in animation. Like you say, it really does feel like a Pixar character or something like that, like that you can control. You know what I mean? There's a lot of care put into it. And there's actual moments where you do stuff in the environment. So there is puzzles in this game. You have like this big glowy thing that's controlled by motion controls, and it can grab stuff in the environment. So say there's like an early example, there's like a water wheel and you have to stop it and jump on top of it and then to get to a higher platform. So say you do that, and then Quill will look at you because you solved this puzzle, and you'll put his hand up in the air, and then you can give him a high five. And it always feels so good when you do that. He has like, or she has a little voice. It's like, yeah, like that when you do it. And it's just so cute. And when you start facing the bad guys in this game, there's some big bad guys and some crazy like creatures you see, especially the last boss, which I won't spoil, but let's just say, if you have a certain phobia, it's going to be a very scary game for you. But yeah, so I mean, I haven't really described what the setting is like. It's kind of like fantastical, like a fantasy setting pretty much, with a bunch of creatures and stuff like that in that type of setting. You got like a giant frog. Well, it's giant to the mouse, of course. Giant. Everything's kind of played out through her perspective in some respects, you know, because you're like kind of looking down at her, kind of like a little toy set.
That's a good way of describing it, as a toy set. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I liked about the way that it controls, so you control Quill, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then also you have the ability to manipulate those objects in the environment. So you're kind of doing things on a micro scale and on a macro scale.
True.
I mean, things are broken up into individual screens, but I thought that was a clever way to blend sort of two different control styles into one. And because, like you were talking about, the environments are all these lush like forests and caves and things that you might expect from a fantasy setting, it works. It works really well. Let me ask you this though: as you were going through playing, were there any standout areas that you liked in particular?
There's actually a couple of moments in the game where there's like these looking glass things that open up, and you can kind of see into them a little bit, and it kind of has a different perspective. There's this part where it kind of opens up, and there's like this fantastical looking area with like a bunch of like colors and vines growing everywhere. I think that's just setting was just so awesome to see.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, that's where that big toad is too. I like that big toad. He had a big old deep booming voice, you know, and I love a 3D platformer, and just the change of perspective and just kind of being inside of a 3D platformer pretty much was just really interesting and unique. It's a unique take, and it does kind of remind me of Astrobot in some aspects, you know, in a different, you know, time and setting, different characters. But it had a really nice storyline. It kind of leaves it off on a cliffhanger. I was surprised by that. They're like, this was book 1, and I'm like, no, I want to see what happens next.
Moss 2 when?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I really enjoyed the game, and I think that a potential sequel, I'm sure they're working on one, or whenever it comes out, I'm definitely going to try it out and play through it. And man, I think I just love the controls. Like, there's little things you can do, like you said, a micro and a macro scale. So say there's like these bugs that come out, they're almost robotic looking, like beetles. And there's actually some kind of like tech in the environment. It has almost a steampunk vibe at times, right? You know, there's like this big, like ominous, like eye thing that can shoot rockets at you if it sees you. And then there's just those little bugs. And the thing with those bugs is you can do like little puzzle solving things with them. You can use your big glowy orb and drag the bug onto a pad, you know, portal-like with a companion cube. And it does something in the environment. And then there's also other ones that you can grab and like shoot things in the environment, like little triggers and stuff to get through different challenges and puzzles. And you can also shoot other bugs with it. It takes almost multitasking. Like you have to like drag the dude over here while you're moving little Quill with your analog stick, jumping on platforms, and then hit the button or shoot the thing. Or when you're actually playing and fighting the bugs, you have to like grab them so they don't get a hit in on Quill too. So you grab him and he can't move, so you strike him a couple times with Quill, and then you can grab him again and strike him a couple times and destroy him. You know, just little things like that just makes this feel like a gameplay experience I've never had before, with some stuff I've experienced, but with that little bit of a VR and interesting twist to it.
There's not like all entirely unique mechanics going on, but I do feel like as sort of a complete package, it wasn't like anything that I had personally played before. I really like it when a game does that sort of like super zoomed in, everything in the world is to the perspective of the character, and it's like much bigger than it would be for us as humans. Like the Toy Story thing where as Quill, you'll walk by a bottle cap that's, half the size of your body and stuff like that. I just think that's a really cool choice for art direction, and it lets the developers introduce some like pretty clever and pretty cool puzzles and little environmental details.
Yeah, I know. I was actually thinking about some of the settings too, because you mentioned that, and then my mind starts going to all the things I've seen. And there's like this moment where you're in the caves for a really long time, and then you go like on this little like I don't know, sponge or something, and you're going through like this cavern, and you go out to like this like beach with all these giant statues that have like winged statues. I just thought that whole area was kind of ominous and creepy, and also just really epic at the same time.
I'll have to be a stereotype of myself here a little bit, but we're talking about this epic fantasy. We're talking about all these awesome fantasy environments. No fantasy is complete without really good music to go with it. So, how do you feel about the soundtrack in Moss?
I loved it. I thought it added so much to the environments. Sometimes it's a little more like just atmospheric and in the background, but when it needs to build and just have those strings going and horns or whatever it needs to just add to the climactic moments in the game, it really just amps it up, builds the tension. And then when it's just like a nice peaceful moment, it's kind of like fades into the background, but you can still hear it, and it's just a really great fantasy soundtrack. I think just sets the tone so well.
I actually just picked up the soundtrack, physical copy of it from Materia Collective not long ago, because I do think it's really good. It is reminiscent of a film score where, sometimes the music is just sort of fitting to the tone or the environment or the place that you're in. But like you were saying, when they want to really swell and like build to a climactic moment, it's really effective in doing that. It's the perfect music. This might sound like an insult, but I mean it as a compliment. It's the perfect music to, if you're doing like some office work or just some like menial work on your computer, to have on in the background, because it's just like soothing and chill. And yeah, I think it's really excellent.
I was typing up the doc for this, getting all ready for the podcast, just had that blasting in my headphones, listening to it, like just getting amped up for this. It's just a great soundtrack, all in all.
Heck yeah. Any other thoughts on Moss that you want to share?
I complained about the tracking earlier. I did have some issues with it, with the sitting, like where I was sitting, or it might have just been how I was set up at the time. But sometimes there was some creatures that were super close to me, and I had to like get the controller down, and they would lose tracking, and they would just shoot off to a random direction. So I'd have to like stand up and recenter, and then do the thing standing up a couple times, just because everything was kind of so close to my face in the game. So it occasionally, when stuff was lower, I did lose tracking, so that took me out just a little bit. But like we said at the top of the podcast, it doesn't really matter too much, because once you're in it, you're really in it, even with the little complaints that I had for the VR. But besides that, I just want to say Quill was freaking adorable, and I wish that she was real. I want to pet Quill.
No kidding. Quill is criminal that we don't have Quill merchandise. The fact that I can't go and purchase a Quill plush is an insult.
Like, really? I actually don't believe that they don't have a plush. Like, that just hit me like, how can they not have a plush?
No, I've never seen it. Same with Astrobot, actually. There's not an Astrobot plush. Like, that's basically the mascot for VR in my head. So, yeah. I'm here to tell you now, Polyarch, I will be buying the merchandise you put out for this game. So take my money. It's on the table for you to just reach over and grab. So that brings up the age-old IndieQuest question. Where are we putting this on the quest log?
This is definitely going to be on the main quest for me, man. Hands down. There's no question. You got to play this game, man.
Glad to hear it, because there would be a mutiny on the podcast if you did not put this one on the main quest. I love this game. I love this game too much to sit by and see it anywhere else.
It's one of those games I beat. I was a little bittersweet because, of course, like I said, it leaves on a cliffhanger. But I was like, man, that was an experience. I just loved it to death. I think everything from the stuff we've been mentioning, the artwork, the animation from Quill, the gameplay, and just everything about this game is a must play for a VR fan, especially on PlayStation VR or whatever VR platform you have.
The highest compliment I can pay it that we haven't already said is when we were putting the notes for this episode together and I saw that Frantic had picked Moss, I was a little bit jealous because I was like, oh, that means I can't bring Moss on a future episode. He's taking Moss from me. So it's a good thing when you're feeling protective and competitive about the game. It probably means that it's pretty good. But, we've got them all sorted in the quest log. What do you say that we move on here to our final segment, which is the fetch quest?
Sweet. The fetch quest. So last episode, we had something called the fetch quest, a brand new third rotating segment, which each of us were just going to blindly go in and grab a game. Well, we grabbed the game and the other person didn't know what it was. And we assigned them and say, hey, check out this game. So for Steve, I went to the Itch bundle for Racial and Injustice bundle. Is that what it's called? I always mess up the name of it.
The bundle for racial justice and equality.
There it is. So I went in there, and that happened a few months ago when all the protests happened and all that. And they were raising money for charity, and they were giving, 1,000 games? It was the most ridiculous amount of games.
It was the single greatest value in gaming ever. And it was a pay what you want bundle, which is even more insane.
Yeah, I threw $50 at it at the time. I was like, dude, take my money. This is so much time and money and so many devs here, and it's for a good cause. So yeah, anyway, I went through that, and there was this game that stuck out to me called The Floor is Jelly. And I looked at it and I was like, this is a Steve ass video game. Steve's gonna like this game. And then I've never played it, never really seen much about it, just a little short snippet of a trailer. And I was like, here you go. Try it out. What do you think about The Floor is Jelly?
So I got to say, you know me pretty well, because this was a solid recommendation. This is another game that is probably best described as a precision platformer. In fact, you know what? I know in a previous episode we used this term and it was kind of a fan favorite, so I'll use it again. Probably easiest to describe this game as a splatformer.
Yeah.
But, just a lot of single screen levels trying to get from A to B. You die when you touch basically anything. There's a bunch of hazards on the stage and you're trying to get through. The mechanic, which might be a little bit obvious based on the name of the game, is that all of the floors, and actually the walls and the ceilings and stuff too, are jelly, I guess is a good way to describe it. They're kind of like Jell-O. Basically, when you jump on them, you'll sink down into them, and then when you jump off of them, it'll kind of follow up after you for a second. It kind of has that wiggly reverb that Jell-O has when you touch it. And the way that comes into the design is it means that just like when you're jumping on a trampoline, if you get it wiggling up and down, get that waveform thing going, and then you jump at the right moment, you'll get some extra momentum that'll launch you a lot higher in your jump than you otherwise would be able to. Or you can kind of use it to stick to walls and stuff too. And so it's a lot of timing your jumps and then reaching distances and heights that you otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. And it's a pretty cool game. It plays with the mechanic of that pretty well. It went by pretty fast. I didn't beat the whole game, but each of the areas was relatively short, and they would introduce kind of a new concept and then play with it a couple times and then move on to the next. So it's clear that they want this to be a relatively tight experience. Maybe I'm wrong about that and it'll end up being a 30-hour game and I just only saw the very beginning of it, but it seems like they want it to be a pretty short experience.
So you said you didn't beat it. Is it going to eventually get on your beat it list ever? Or are you just going to say, I'm good?
I think I will go back and finish it up.
Okay.
It's just that I played it for an hour and then I got distracted by other stuff that came out, other awesome indie games. But they start to do some pretty interesting things. So one of the first areas, the mechanic they introduce is basically water, which I guess isn't that much of a mechanic, but you'll be able to jump off of a platform, get a bunch of height, and then when you land in the water, you will sink down basically exactly as far as the height you just got.
Oh, okay.
So you have to get enough height so that when you jump into the water, you'll sink down far enough to like make it underneath ledges that are underwater and stuff. And so it's a lot of finding the right spots to build, I guess, jump momentum, for a lack of a better word, in order to reach underwater areas in the right speed and velocity.
That's fascinating. And I think the art style is pretty cool. It has a nice look to it. It's almost like what would be a good description of the color palette? Like kind of like, I don't know. I was trying to think of. I had a word in my head and it just like escaped me. How would you describe the color palette of the game?
It's very, gosh, there's a word I'm looking for, but it's it's a simple color palette, like a lot of simple colors and gradients, but it's got a lot of like really soft, pleasing blues and pinks and stuff. Yeah, it's just a really chill game in a lot of ways.
Also, the music sounded cool. It's Disaster Piece did it. Like, that's a really popular indie like band that does a lot of indie game music. Do you like the music in it? Did it stick out to you or anything?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, you can tell that it's done with a lot of care. It reminded me a little bit of some of the songs from Fez or Celeste.
Yeah, Fez is Disaster Piece, isn't it?
Yep,
pretty sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's the same artist. Yeah, and like a nice like chill, kind of almost like electronic soundy type music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have the right words for it, but if you listen to the soundtrack, it has that sort of like soft electronic, comforting melodies that I think of as synonymous with indie games.
Yeah, definitely. So you assigned me a game, unless you have something else to say about The Floor is Jelly.
The only thing I have to say about The Floor is Jelly is that I'm done talking about it. Now I assigned you a game.
Okay.
And that game was Her Story. I thought you would dig this game. I will admit that my pick was a little bit selfish because I like the game a lot. And I did a little bit of snooping on the old Steam backlog, saw that you already owned it, but there was no minutes played next to that game. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, let's correct this. I knew it was only a couple hours long. So tell me about your experience with Her Story.
So if you guys don't know what this game is, I'll describe it. Basically, you're sitting down at, I guess, an old school computer, and you're going through a bunch of snippets of interviews of this woman and trying to piece together this murder mystery. And I thought it was really interesting. So basically, the main like input of the game is you type in keywords. So when you jump into the game, the first one that's up there is murder. So you have 5 different things that mention murder in them, 5 different video clips. They could be anywhere from like 2 seconds to like a minute, 2 minutes sometimes, depending on what it is. And you click it, you watch it, you absorb the information, and you keep doing that. And just it's an FMV game, so all these are actual, like an actual actor. She won awards for this, I think the Game Awards, maybe, or something like that. And she did a really excellent job. She's actually a really awesome actor, especially just playing off of a camera, I guess. There's nobody else in the room or whatever. And it's just a really fascinating thing. You start going down the rabbit hole because you play a clip and then they'll start naming names. They'll be like, Carl. Let me see. I got my notes right here. You'll see Carl, Simon, Hannah, and then they'll start listing names. Or, we used to have a Ouija board. Ooh, I'll type in Ouija. Well, what's going to, and then you start going down the rabbit hole, just learning the story and piecing together the story from snippets of, the recorded footage. And I eventually did figure out the storyline and kind of pieced it together. And I was like, okay, so this goes here. This person did that. And it's just a really interesting way to experience a storyline, because if you just watch the interviews, you probably could piece it together instantly. It's like, oh, front to back. But having it like almost like a detective thing where you're trying to like, okay, this person knows this person was here, and then this person did that, and then it's kind of like I actually started writing stuff down on Post-it notes here, and it was a good time.
Yeah, It's interesting too, because just depending on what keywords you find, how you uncover the story can be pretty different, right? I mean, you might find the ending relatively quick, maybe even before you have like context for what it means. And then later you'll find some other details that will fill in some of what led to that revelation, conclusion, whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. And yeah, how you experience the story is just going to be wildly different from person to person.
Yeah, there is a clip that basically says what happens, but there is like no context to it. You know what I mean? You kind of, they say names like this person did this and this person did this. So you're like, okay, I don't know who these people are. And then you start learning who they are. You're like, oh, okay, so this person was that person and they were pretending to do that, blah, blah. I'm not trying to spoil anything because I feel like 90% of this game is just learning the story. But
yeah,
the way you interact with the computer, I think the other reason you gave me this game is kind of like the games I had on a previous episode where I had the phone game and then the IM game where, yeah, so it's that, but it's a 90s computer database with video clips. So I liked it a lot. It was real fun. And I did beat it. It's very short. It's like 2 hours something. 2 hours 30 maybe.
Yeah, and it can kind of be as short or as long as you want to some degree because it just kind of depends on how much digging you want to do for other clips.
Yeah.
Even after you find the story out, you can find supplementary clips in there. There are some terms you'll learn that'll send you to like kind of Easter egg type clips and stuff. Yeah, it's a good time. It's a really good example, I think, of a game that has one very specific mechanic, and using like just that one mechanic tells a really interesting story.
Yeah, and I did my beat tweet because, you know, I have to do that. And I put in there, it was riveting. I was riveted. Like, I was like on the edge of my seat. I felt like I was solving this case. So that's a good experience to have. It's a unique experience. I've never had a game do that to me where I'm like, okay, I'm piecing this all together. I'm going to figure this out. And I did. And it was awesome. So yeah, it's a fantastic game, man. I loved it.
Awesome. I'm glad you did. Do you think you'll, at some point here down the line, play Telling Lies, which is the next game from the same developer?
How about, not promising for the next episode, but in a future episode, me and you both play Telling Lies and come back and talk about it together. What do you think?
I'm for it. I'm always here to talk about Telling Lies.
You played it already or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So man, I guess we'll talk about it later. But I was like, I thought I was gonna get you there. Like, oh, he's never played it, so we can both play it.
I was day one for Telling Lies, but I would be happy to talk about it on the future episode.
Do you think since I beat this game, I should consider putting it on the quest log? That's the question I have.
Ooh, interesting question. You know, normally I don't think generally we will put fetch quest games on the quest log because it's more like a sample it, let me get your tastes. But I mean, here we are, a game that is relatively straightforward. You beat it, I've beaten it, we kind of know the full mechanic. I say, you know what, let's just go ahead and do it. No reason to leave it off, right?
It's gonna be on a main quest, right? It's got to be a main quest game.
That's
right?
A main quest for sure, absolutely.
It's our list, and I feel good putting it on there. Let's do it.
Yep, and you know what? That's how we roll on IndieQuest. Sometimes, if we want to throw a game on, we will. It's our quest log.
Hell yeah. And I think it's a game everybody should play because it's so unique. It's a high recommendation, and I really do appreciate you giving me that one because it gave me that push to play it finally. Because, like you said, it's been on my Steam library probably for years at this point. So, awesome.
Well, I think that brings us then towards the end of the show. Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think that's about it, man. I always enjoy sitting down, talking awesome indie games with you, and just geeking out, man. I feel like we're what's the word I'm looking for? Two peas in a pod or something like that. When it comes to indie games, we both love them to death. So it's so good, man. I've enjoyed these episodes so far. I just feel like just getting into like the nuts and bolts of a game like this is just so much fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the recommendations have been awesome. I'm learning about new games. I'm getting to reminisce on old games I loved. And like you said, it's just a blast to sit down and talk about awesome games with someone that has good taste.
As always, guys, thanks so much for listening to the show. We appreciate your feedback and all the things that you've brought to the show. So far, the reception seems great. We're excited about the future. And time for the plugs. You can find me on Twitter at Frantic Society and all the wacky stuff I do over there. And how about you, Steve? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and on Twitch at Blinkoom. That's BLINKOOM like Mega Man. Yeah, stop by the Twitch channel. We are usually playing indie games or sometimes other cool stuff too. But if you want to stay up to date with the podcast, you can also follow the podcast on Twitter at IndieQuest Pod.
We want your community indie game thoughts and questions. If you have any of them, send them over to the email address at indiequestpod@gmail.com. And you may or may not hear them on the show. To find this and other shows in the excellent Polykill network, go over to polykill.com. Check out some of those other shows that we have over there. They're all wonderful. Now, Steve-O, Steve Buddy, Blink, why don't you sign us off and say goodbye to the good old folks out there?
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Again, just to reiterate, appreciate all the positive feedback on the podcast so far. Happy to be talking about awesome indie games and sharing some recommendations. So be good, take care of each other, and go enjoy some indie games.
So I'm going to place this on the quest log.
Bless you.
That was my dog.
We can go back in. I'll bring you into it.
It's going to be a main quest, hands down.
Yeah, there'd be a mutiny on the podcast.
Freaking dog.
So
what are you
funny.
doing, Raven? Come here. Did you just wake up, buddy? Go lay down, Bubba. All right. Okay, I'll start from there.
All right, take us back in.